Like most of the cast, Chipp Zanuff has had his defense modifier value decrease, thus decreasing the damage he takes. In the old patch, this is how much damage he would take in this sequence. 129. This is how much damage he takes in the current patch. 121, so a decrease of 8 damage in this particular sequence. Chipp should still be a fairly squishy, low health character compared to some of the other casts, but this will certainly save his life in a few instances. Up to this point in Guilty Gear Strive's lifespan, Chipp had access to one of 2 3-frame normals, his 5p. This meant that the opponents had to be very careful with how they ended their block strings, because if they ended at -3 and standing, Chipp would be one of 2 characters who could actually punish them for this kind of mistake. Now, the startup seems to have been reduced by a single frame, so now this is pretty much a standard 4-frame jab. So now, the Chipp doesn't have to be an outlier for how you have to structure your offensive sequences and having to avoid being -3 in situations. Do note, though, that this normal still whiffs against crouching opponents, as it did in the previous patch. There's also been some adjustment to the collision hitboxes with it. Namely, if I remember correctly, the frame 3 version of the hit had a stubbier hitbox and then expanded outward over the active frames. Now, that's pretty much been unified to be identical to what the later active frames have been. I am not really able to demonstrate or show that off here incredibly well, but I think there are going to be some situations where longtime Chipp players should be able to notice the difference. Overall, I would think that the collision change is a buff, but losing a 3-frame normal for Chipp is certainly a nerf. Unlike some other characters, Chipp's 6p actually received a buff, whereas so far we've been seeing most characters have some form of nerf to their 6p, Chipp actually has a decrease in recovery on his 6p. I'll go ahead and put the 2 versions from the previous patch and the current patch side by side for us to compare. Obviously, this means that if Chipp ever whiffs this particular normal, he's going to be a little safer for doing so. 2 Heavy Slash has had its blowback adjusted. It used to launch the opponent slightly high up with a bit of horizontal range to it. Usually, this is set up for pretty good sequences where you could do 3 normals into an Alpha Blade after using 2 Heavy Slash to launch. Now, 2 Heavy Slash launches the opponent higher and with less horizontal blowback. They seem to fall farther away, but I think this has more to do with the fact that they travel higher in the air and then thus have more to fall down as they're flying back. On paper, you would think that this would probably help him out with some Alpha Blade conversions, but it actually kind of messes with a few of the routes that he had. As you can see here, the sequence that used to combo on Asuka now whiffs. Of course, if you cut out a normal, you can easily make 2 Heavy Slash combo into an Alpha Blade. And even then, it seems like it's pretty easy to pick up some confirms afterwards. But still, there's going to be some nuances and changes to Chipp's overall combo routing because of these changes to his 2 Heavy Slash, as well as other aspects of his kit. Chipp's 6 Heavy Slash also has a change similar to this, where now it has decreased horizontal blowback instead. In the previous patch, you would push the enemy pretty far away. Compare the blowback in the current patch, where it's been reduced. As you can see, Asuka on the ground-bound stayed a lot closer to Chipp. I could see this as being both a buff and a nerf in some ways. It could be a buff because Chipp has the enemy closer to him, so he's able to pick up some links that might not have been possible before. On the other hand, it also means that his corner carry using this normal has been significantly reduced, and it could also mean that some combos that he relied on using no longer work in this current patch. Chipp mains will be having to explore this to figure out the full connotations of this change, I think. The grounded diagonal Alpha Blade also has a change to it as well regarding blowback. There's decreased falling speed, meaning the opponent falls slower, and decreased horizontal blowback. Before in the previous patch, if you did this sequence, it would drop. As you can see, Close Slash did not connect. Now, if we take a look at it in the current patch, we can see that this link to Close Slash is possible. So again, there's some opportunities for this to be considered a buff, but this also has grander implications for Chipp's corner-to-corner routing. Now, I've been postulating that these could be a combination of buffs and nerfs, because on one hand, it seems like they opened up potential combo routes with new links to them. However, what's been established as Chipp's previous bread and butters before that were very effective and often used at high-level play simply no longer exist because of these changes. This is a combo that would utilize crouching Heavy Slash to launch and then using grounded Alpha Blade diagonal twice in order to go coast to coast. I might have bungled it at the end right there, but we can clearly see that I was able to go coast to coast. And with proper optimization, there's a knockdown here and potential wall break. That combo was pretty appealing for Chipp players to use because it meant that you could always put the opponent into the corner regardless of where you were on screen, and if you had the resources as well as the proper execution, you could potentially cash out on a super for wall break and hard knockdown to guarantee your positive bonus and continue to run your offense. If you try to execute that style of combo route now, you begin to find that all these changes come together to nerf these particular routes for Chipp. As you can see here, I'm not able to get the second Alpha Blade to connect anymore. You'll also note that this is a pretty consistent outcome regardless of what normals you're trying to use to set up combos after the first Alpha Blade. 2/ will pretty consistently whiff here. And again, if you go for a 3-hit sequence, you're not even going to get this to reach in the first place. You might be wondering why Arc System Works would nerf Chipp like this. Well, that's because they're trying to rework the character to be reliant on his completely new special move that's in the game, which is Tightrope. This has a lot of implications for Chipp with tons of tech to explore, both in terms of his offense, his mix-ups, and his combo routing. I suppose now is as good a time as any to introduce you all to Chipp's new special move, Tightrope. Let's go ahead and explore the basics a bit before we talk about some other changes that are used because of this. You do the special move by doing quarter circle back and heavy slash. If you don't hold the input, Chipp will just summon the rope and then he's not able to interact with it. Unless he does a couple of special moves. So, you can either do the input again and hold it, and then you'll run along in it as if you're running up a wall. The other way to do it is by using a diagonal Alpha Blade and then holding up or down. Depending on which direction you hold to touch the rope, determines which side that you'll attach to the rope. This is holding up. And this is holding down. As you can see, the rope lasts for quite some time, so you should be able to attach to it a couple of times if you so choose. You can also immediately go to the rope by holding down the heavy slash button when you do the input. From there, you're able to swap sides on the rope by tapping up or down. It doesn't matter which side of the rope that you're on. Tapping either direction is going to swap your side. So, for example, I'm going to start down on the rope, tap down, and you'll see that I'll switch up to the rope. So it's a handy way of sort of remembering that if you ever want to swap a side, you don't have to keep track of what you're doing. You'll also know that it's pretty quick for you to be able to swap sides with this rope. This opens up a lot of flexibility for Chipp when it comes to how he wants to use this tool. Additionally, you have access to all of your wall running attacks while you're on the tightrope. All those moves have been buffed as well, and we'll go ahead and compare those with the old patch version in just a moment. The last real thing to mention about tightrope itself is that you can disengage from the tightrope by pressing the dust button when you're running. As you can see, Chipp falls with a little bit of momentum afterwards. This tightrope is a completely new special move for Chipp, and it's going to become the cornerstone of his character. What Arc System Works wants you to do is have access to the rope, and when you have access to the rope, you get access to new ways of approaching through neutral, creating new mix-ups, as well as having new combo routes that usually deal more damage than you did before. It does mean that Chipp is reliant on somehow setting up the rope to begin with the combos, but luckily for us, it seems pretty easy in order for Chipp to set those things up. All of Chipp's wall run attacks have received several changes to them. Most of them have had damage increases, these normals being his wall run P, wall run close slash, wall run far slash, wall run heavy slash, and wall run 6 heavy slash. I did not mean for wall run to be such a tongue twister, but have fun with it yourselves at home. First off, his running punch. 23 damage in the old patch. Wall run punches new damage. 29. As it's actually hard for me to make it so that I only get the far slash hit of wall run, I'm going to have to just do both of them together and compare. 33, then 21 for a total of 54 in the old patch. The wall running slashes new damage. 42, then 26 for a total of 68. The old damage on running heavy slash. 37. Heavy slash's new wall run damage. 47. The old damage on wall run 6 heavy slash. 54. Then 6 heavy slashes new damage. 56. Wall Run 5K did not receive a damage buff. Instead, it received a nerf where it can no longer cancel into itself, much like Chipp's Grounded 5K. That was the old patch. In the current patch, 5K lost this ability. There, I was able to link it, but you can see how much longer it took to come out because I wasn't actually canceling it. Now, you might have noticed that I decided to have Chipp run up the corner wall as opposed to having him demonstrate these normals and their damage changes along the tightrope walk. That's because, to my surprise in my testing, these damage buffs don't actually apply to these normals when Chipp is on the tightrope. They maintain their old original unbuffed damage. 27 instead of 42. 23 instead of 29. 37 instead of, I think, at 42. And 45 instead of 47 or 48. It's very odd that they would give this buff to Chipp, but then not give it to where you're most likely going to be seeing these normals. So I'm not entirely sure what the idea is from Arc System Works, unless there's some corner combo routing from Chipp that has been heavily nerfed from the previous patch that now incentivizes Chipp to go for these wall run combos a lot more. It's probably just the case in general since, you know, these normals now do more damage. But I still think it's quite odd that this buff doesn't apply to his normals when they're on the tightrope. I'm not sure if this is a bug or intentional. So if you have some ideas or some theories about this, let me know in the comments below. The last change to Chipp in this patch has been to one of his supers, particularly Zansei Rouga, where he flies across the screen at you. This super has an increased damage as well as increased base damage. Here, it did 129 damage against Asuka. This is the new damage. 140, so a pretty substantial increase in terms of its overall damage, and we'd have to look at some combo routing where Chipp would use this in order to see the minimum guaranteed damage. This should make it more appealing for some Chipp players to go for when they're trying to secure the kill, as it does more damage than his other super, which is usually used to break the wall in the first place. We'll see if Chipp's integrated into this combo routing at all. I feel like I'd be remiss not to be pulling some references from Marvello, who's been posting a lot of potential Chipp tech on Twitter when it comes to the new tightrope move, as this is very much something that's supposed to level up the character dramatically. There's tons of implications for the character, combo routing, pressure sequences, and the like from it. So let's go ahead and look at a few examples of what you could potentially cook up. This is actually courtesy from a player named Summit here, and Marvello scouted this out and decided to share. Very impressive stuff, actually. While Chipp did lose access to some of his resourceless routes, he seems to get pretty good rewards once he's actually spending some meter to set up the tightrope. Again, it's pretty flashy stuff, but I do also have to stress that while it is more damage, it's also more of a resource investment on Chipp's side to get it in the first place. We've looked at combos so far, but let's talk about neutral implications. While Chipp is upside down on the rope, he's actually able to beat out any sort of low-profiling attack and able to get a good whiff punish on it. This is Marvello labbing out some things with Happy Chaos. Again, some pretty good potential that's going to need time to be explored in each particular matchup to see how useful a lot of this can be. So far, I've shown you a little bit of combo sauce, but now let's look at some potential pressure sauce that Marvello is starting to cook up with the character. Here, he's using a close slash into blue RC cancel in order to set up a true string tightrope in the corner to then run some offense. As you can see, on that counter hit, you're actually burst safe if you jump off the rope. This is the conversion that you get if the opponent doesn't have burst available or they choose not to burst. Lastly, if the opponent tries to YRC you on this setup, It is safe to it as well. Some pretty potent stuff to be cooking up. And one last little bit of potential tech for Chipp before I just tell you all to go look this up on Twitter yourselves with the hashtag GTSD_CH. Small here posts a sequence where actually there was a poster, Jawa right here, who posted that you could actually do safe jump setups with this tightrope special. As you can see right there, there's potential then to go into mix-ups with the tightrope setup as well. Diagonal blade to go into same side overhead or cross-up overhead. There's tons of tech that Chipp has yet to explore with this particular new move of his. And while he did lose some of his strengths, a lot of them have been focused on getting this move set up in the first place, which in all honesty seems pretty practical and easy to use in a lot of situations. It's still pretty early on in the patch, but I feel like Chipp is possibly one of the biggest winners of this patch in terms of what he's received. He takes a little bit less damage, which I don't know how big of a deal that is because some characters have had their damage increased to offset that change, which is a little weird in my opinion. However, Chipp receiving this new special with tightrope opens up a lot of potential for the character. It seems to fundamentally flesh out his offense, his mix-ups, his combo conversions in ways that the character has greatly found appreciation for. He does lose a few things in return for this, though, and namely, if you get in a situation where you get the hit and you don't have any resources to set up tightrope, you're going to have worse conversions overall for it. But once you get your offense going, you're going to be more rewarded for it than before. And I think it makes Chipp a little more interesting to play because he's no longer running up and just doing like Autobot pressure with his Rekka series. Instead, he has some potential for the tightrope stuff to really make him feel like some sort of crafty ninja that's coming at you from all angles. I think it's a pretty cool way of approaching the character. I know some Chipp players are feeling pretty bad because they've lost some of their old routing conversions that were pretty much free and resourceless for the character, but I think it's more important to look at the things that you've gained and see the potential there. Yes, there's going to be some situations where you are going to be worse off, but there's also going to be situations, especially when you're at an advantage, where you're simply going to be better off with it. We'll see how Chipp falls out within the patch itself.